Welcome back to Midweek Politics. I'm David Pakman. Joining us now is Supna Zaidi, and she's here to talk about the documentary film The Third Jihad. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me on your show.
So let me give your background first. You're a Pakistani American. Your background is in law and policy, and you support this film. I presume you believe it's going to encourage dialogue within the Muslim community between Muslims and non-Muslims in the U.S., and also between liberals and conservatives. So give me like the quick summary of the film and what people should expect to see in The Third Jihad.
Okay, The Third Jihad is narrated by a man named Dr. Zaidi whose family's from Syria, and he's a Sunni Muslim. And very simply, what it wants to do is distinguish political Islam from Islam as a personal faith. The perspective the narrator's coming from is, like myself, having grown up in the United States, where, we understand the principle of separation of church and state and First Amendment rights. And so we simply believe that a person has a right to be as orthodox or as secular as they want to be. The law will protect them equally. And what we see as a problem after 9/11 is not Islam itself, which is what too many people argue, but rather a movement within Islam that doesn't want to separate religion from politics. And when that happens, what it simply does is encourage somebody's version of a religion into the law and forces everybody to live under that interpretation.
So when you say that everybody has the right to be as religious or as secular as they want, who is it that disagrees with that? You're saying it's this faction within the Muslim faith?
Well, there is an ideology within the, Islamic legal scripture or within the Muslim community, depends how you want to define it. I mean, the more glaring examples are groups like Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. There are a lot more progressive, more subtle organizations that do not believe in violence and that do not believe in militarily overthrowing governments and society and imposing Islamic law, but nevertheless do believe that through democratic institutions, through lobbying, through having a sufficiently observant Muslim voting bloc, that they can still at the same time have Islamic law by persuasion rather than violence.
So you mentioned that the part of the Third Jihad, and the website is thethirdjihad.com for the documentary. You say that part of the goal of the movie is to encourage dialogue between liberals and conservatives as it relates to the Muslim community. What are the differences as you see them between liberals and conservatives? That is, why is dialogue necessary on this issue between those two groups?
Okay. This answer is completely my personal opinion, so that's my disclaimer.
That's what we
want. I come from a really liberal background, being a girl who grew up in a traditional Muslim family, but, coming to America, so I feel like maybe being a girl, being an immigrant, I've always kind of had an affinity towards a very liberal worldview. But ever since 9/11, I feel like I'm kind of stuck in this place where if I talk to conservatives, I can't get anywhere because they just think Islam is a problem, and they have this very extreme reaction where they just want to talk about, anti-immigration policies or talking about,
right.
If you're a real moderate Muslim, what part of the Quran would you rip out? And I think that's just ridiculous. But then on the other extreme, when I talk to my friends that are really liberal and stuff like that, they don't want to concede that there is a real problem going on within the Muslim world that needs to be countered with either a more progressive interpretation of Islam, i.e. through getting behind a progressive mosque or an imam, or simply conceding that there is value to certain secular democratic principles and universal human rights that should be supported in the Muslim world.
So at the beginning of the film, it says, this is not a film about Islam. It is about the threat of radical Islam. Only a small percentage of the world's 1.3 billion Muslims are radical. This film is about them. So what percentage of the world's Muslims, in your estimation, would fall under what the movie calls radical?
I think that's a really tough poll to do, but from different research I've read, the number varies from 5 to 10%. But the problem is when you're talking about 5 or 10% of over a billion person population, those numbers can still be significant.
Well, it's unbelievably significant. I have a hard time imagining that 10% of a 1.3 billion Muslim world population would fall under what is being called radical. I mean, we must have a pretty loose definition of radical if we're going to include 130 million Muslims in that, right?
No, absolutely true. And for me, I guess I don't even like that phrase radical Islam because radical doesn't give you any value. It's not a word that gives you any information. That's why for me, I try to be more specific and say I'm simply against political Islam or the politicization of any religion. And when I say that, what I try to include is not just that stereotype of the Taliban or Al-Qaeda where people are violent, but people who believe that Islamic law should govern society and that they believe that they have a right to pursue this goal nonviolently. So that, to me, does stretch the number to a larger number that may be as high as 10%. But I personally have done no research to give you a specific percentage.
Let me mention again, we're speaking with Supna Zaidi, and we're talking about the documentary film, The Third Jihad, and thethirdjihad.com is the website. What's your take on this movie? It sounds like, based on the press materials on the site and hearing you speak, it sounds like there may actually not be that much agreement between you and how this film is portraying a lot of the facts that it claims to portray.
I think we agree in the sense that regardless of how small or large you think within the Muslim population is extremist or ideologically, politically Islamist, they're the only ones that are active in the Muslim community. Moderates and liberals kind of, stop going to mosques as they get older, don't participate in community affairs, and kind of just mainstream into, American society or European society. So what you're left with is, with immigration, new Muslims coming into countries like the United States, and the leadership is potentially only political. And so through sermons and education, they educate their communities and congregation or student bodies within Islamic schools to think that it's okay to want Sharia law in countries like the United States, and if not violently, again, by persuasion, which is basically lobbying in the vote. I can give you one tangible example. There is an Islamic seminary in the United States called the Zaidi Institute. It's the first one founded here. When I first heard about it, I was really excited because I thought, okay, now we're not going to deal with imams coming from, other countries who have completely different cultural or patriarchal backgrounds that may be sexist, this, that, or the other, and we'll wipe out a lot of the problems that we have within the Muslim community. But unfortunately, I read some interviews with one of the founders of the Zaidi Institute, and he conceded that he was someone who used to believe in, the overthrow of government violently for Sharia law, but now he believes that it should be done by persuasion. And though this is legal, I just think it's completely un-American. The First Amendment is something that shouldn't be a left or right issue. It's something that we should all be able to get behind because its goal is to keep everyone from different faiths or no faith at all equal and protected under the law. And I don't want kids graduating from a seminary and becoming imams in American mosques that are going to teach this to new generations of American Muslims.